I am Professor Jonathan Walton. I am Professor of Religion and Society at Harvard Divinity School. I was trained in social ethics, and I am also the Plummer Professor of Christian Morals and the Pusey Minister in the Memorial Church. So I'm assuming, since I am an ethicist and I'm the Professor of Christian Morals, that Aaron tapped me to come here to moralize and make everybody feel bad. So let me begin. Now, I'm here to talk about something that really can't be quantified: passion and sincerity in the teaching process. And in doing so, I am actually, in some ways, my few minutes here, this is a tribute to my father. My father is a disciplined man, but by no means dogmatic. He's a really simple fellow, but he's far from simplistic. And he taught me a lot. He thinks clearly. He's the type that thinks along binaries. You have two choices. You have two types. And for him, you have two types of people in this world. You have the type of people that want to be something. What do I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a lawyer, a doctor. I want to be a politician. People who seek professional titles, roles to play. But then you also have people who want to do something, according to my father. And people want to do something. These are those who want to engage in activities that are bigger than themselves. They want to enact change. They want to be social engineers, if you will. They want to engage in a world that they are just a small part of it, but somehow can lose themselves in the service of it. So there's this difference between people who want to be someone and the people who want to do something. Now, when we think about those who want to be, well, think about this. From the earliest times in our life, we're thinking about what it is we want to be when we grow up. If you visit my twins' third grade class, you will hear a vast range of responses. There are those who want to be lawyers. There are those who want to be a doctor. I met a young lady the other day, 9 years old. She wants to be a forensic pathologist. I found that kind of interesting, so I actually inquired on how it is that she came to want to be a forensic pathologist. Her answer was kind of funny. She told me that according to her and her mother, forensic pathologists are the best looking people on television. Now, while we may find this kind of response funny, and indeed it is funny, many of our undergraduates that enter into our classroom, their sense of what they want to be is not much more developed than this. For some, it's what they've been exposed to: matrilineal exposure. For some, it's salary, social status, prestige. But among all of these things, this affords us, you and I, the opportunity to move young people in our classrooms from wanting to just simply be something to what do you want to do? Do you simply want to just make a living? Or do you want to have a life that's worth living? And this is where it falls upon you and I. Now, many in the literature across education, they have talked about moving from antiquated pedagogical models to more constructive, more modern concepts of teaching, particularly from moving from subject-centered classrooms to student-centered classrooms, where we take into consideration student insights, student experiences, and the like. Well, I agree with this to a certain point. I agree with this insofar as if we are just talking about inflexible standards of assessment in the classroom, I do think that it's time for us to move on. If we are just talking about punitive measures as it relates to the pedagogical experience, either you are going to pay attention to me or you are going to fail this class. Either you are going to do the reading or you are not going to be prepared for the quiz. I absolutely think that it's time to move on. But as it relates to the passion for teaching and the passion for what it is that you and I teach, I am not so sure that I'm ready to jettison subject-centered approach so quickly. Because I think this gives us the opportunity to lose ourselves in the subject matter that means the most to you and I. This is going to demand innovation on our part. It's going to demand that we think differently about past practices in the classroom. It's going to demand that you and I begin to think differently about our role as educators, our roles as professors. It's going to cause us, if we're going to be committed to having passion, to having sincerity, it's going to cause levels of vulnerability that many of us are not comfortable with. Innovation is difficult. Innovation is demanding. It's difficult because it causes us to have to look beyond ideologies that were passed down to us. When I talk about pedagogical ideologies, what I'm talking about here are the taken for granted dimensions of our profession. That we simply get up and we become bearers of knowledge, that we simply get up, that we lecture and or possibly we might run a seminar format. And we want to see how well students are able to process what we have offered them through the literature and or through our lectures. It's difficult to disrupt that ideology. It's also going to be demanding upon us because it demands that we disenthrall ourselves of assumptions that have been naturalized over time into what I like to call the heresy of certainty. We just know what's the right thing to do because we are the expert. We are the resident expert in the classroom. We do it this way. Why? Because it's the way our professors did it. And it's the way that their professors did it before them. And so over time, this becomes the right way because it's the way that it's always been done. And it's the way it's always been done. Why? Because it's the right way. And don't ask me any questions anymore. But this belies our professed commitment to a life of the mind, in my opinion. Harvard's own Howard Gardner, I believe he hits the nail on the head with this quote. It comes out of the introduction of his latest book, Truth, Goodness, and Beauty Reframed. Gardner says, conditions change, people change, but in the absence of continuous dialogue, received wisdom evolves into unreflective orthodoxy. We must continue to challenge and call into question what's been passed down to us as it relates to our pedagogical practices. And I think the perfect place to do it, the perfect place for us to lay bare why it is you and I entered this great profession in the first place is in the classroom. Because it's in the classroom that where we're allowed to do things. We're enabled to do things that we cannot necessarily do in our research and our writing. We're allowed to take risks. We're allowed to take chances that the demands of our discipline sometimes constrain us from casting our wings into the morning of observation and innovation and being intellectually entrepreneurial. That is to say, just stepping out on something, not quite knowing where we're going to land. Let me ask a quick question. How many of you have ever been in that class before? Have you ever been in a class like that where the professor, the teacher, wasn't interested in what he or she was saying, and therefore you had no interest whatsoever? You couldn't even hear. It just became womp, 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 womp. Now let me ask you another question for those of us who share this professional need. How many times has that been you? You were the professor. Oh, I'm the only one who's going to tell the truth here. It happens. It happens, and most likely it's going to happen when we don't care about our subject matter. And often we don't care about our subject matter for a couple of reasons that you'll be surprised about. Sometimes we're not passionate about our subject matter. Why? Because we're experts on our subject matter. And we have chosen a class to teach because of the fact this is where we have cut our teeth. We have built our career on this particular subject matter. We are the go-to person on it, and we were at a particular point in our life, but it does not get us up in the morning anymore. But yet we still teach it. Or it could be the fact that we're just simply teaching the canons of our field, something that's been bequeathed to us, as I said, and that we're offering to somebody else, and it does not, if anything, it puts us to sleep at night rather than waking us up in the morning. Well, how do we do this? How do we change this? When are we going to have the courage to begin following our passions? To begin to think boldly, not just about the things that we are expert, in which we are expert, but in the things that you and I are interested in. The theologian that's interested in neuroscience. She's interested in neuroscience because of the fact when she assesses the role that prayer plays in the life of individuals, and when she looks at the impact that religious icons have on temperament, she is really interested in and spends her time in Harvard bookstore going through the shelf, seeing what neuroscientists are having to say on imagery, on prayer, on meditation. Or the scientist, the person at the medical school, the person that has come forward and knows that prayer makes a difference for surgeons, for doctors, in calming their hands and getting them prepared to go in their task. This is an opportunity for cross-collaboration, for intellectual exchange. That can take place in the classroom. But what we have to do, we have to first decide the difference between being an expert and being an intellectual. An expert, we assume we have all the answers. Knowledge is practical. I'm riffing off Richard Hofstadter here a little bit. Knowledge is practical. It's pragmatic. It can be applied toward making a particular case. We can achieve a particular ends. This is us helping students to be somebody. But the intellectual task is much different. Now riffing off of Edward Said. It's neither presentist nor practical. It doesn't play by the rules, but it rises above the rules. It challenges accepted ways of knowing and doing, and in the process, it's actually possible to live differently. What can we do? What can we be passionate about? Well, I know the difference between an expert and an intellectual in terms of a task. I told you there's a story about my father, right? And a fishing expedition. About this time of the year, we used to have cookouts in my house in Georgia, suburb of Atlanta. My mother was an expert at getting the fish. What she would do, she would get into her car, she would open the garage door, she would drive her Cadillac Seville down the driveway. She would make a right on Hunters Hill Drive, she would make a right on Salem Road, she would drive up Salem Road, she would make a right into the Winn-Dixie Shopping Center. She would park her car, get out of her car, she would go into the back of the Winn-Dixie, she would go to Zach, who worked at the fish counter. She would say, I want 3 pounds of tilapia, I would like 3 pounds of catfish, I would like 4 pounds of shrimp. She would get back in her car, she would make a left out of the shopping center, drive back down Salem Road, make a left onto Hunters Hill Drive, come in, turn into the driveway, come in the house, she has fish. My father, he was a little bit different. He approached the task in a much more complicated way. he would call Rufus Philpott on the phone. He would go out in the garage. He would prepare his tackle box. He would get his fishing poles ready. He would go in the house, take a nap. About 2 hours later, Rufus Philpott would come up in the pickup truck. He would get in the pickup truck with Rufus Philpott. They would drive. They would go down. They would get on I-20. They would get I-20 West. They would get on 75 South. They would head Cape Canaveral down in Florida. They would check into a hotel. They would take a 3-hour nap in the hotel. They would get out. They would pay $40 to get on a deep-sea fishing boat. They would go out on a deep-sea fishing boat for 4 hours, get fish, come back, get back in the car, drive up 75 North, get back on 20. You know the story, right? Or so I thought, until the first time my father invited me to go on a fishing trip with him. Started off just as I remembered him always doing. Rufus Philpott pulled up. I got in the car with Rufus Philpott, my father. We drove. We went down 20. We went down 75 South. We went to Cape Canaveral. We checked in. Hotel. We got up. We went on the fishing boat for 4 hours. But we did not catch any fish. So we got back in the pickup truck. We drove up 75 North. We came 20 East. We got off at the exit at Panola Road. We came down Panola Road. We made a left on Salem Road. We pulled into the Winn-Dixie Shopping Center. We went to Zach at the back of the fish counter. We said, I need 3 pounds tilapia. You see where I'm going here. My mother was an expert. Every summer after that, when it was time to cook out, it was always my choice to get in that pickup truck with my father. We barely knew what we were doing. We tried something different every time until we caught some fish. But that wasn't the point. The point was that we were committed, we were passionate, my father was sincere, and he was vulnerable and showed his son what he didn't know, but we're going to learn it together. And this is the task that you and I have. In the 3 minutes that we have left, I want you and I to think about some things. I want you to think about, how do we choose our classes? I want us to think about, how is it that you teach? Do you give yourself? Do you show of yourself? Are you okay with laying to bear what it is that you don't know? And in the process, rendering yourself vulnerable in the pedagogical process. And this is a very important question. What are the cultural and institutional impediments that keep us from teaching our passions? I'm a professor of religion in America particularly. Oftentimes, if I'm teaching about 20th or 21st century Pentecostals or evangelicals, somebody might accuse me of proselytizing. All of a sudden, I have become that because I'm passionate about it. As if when I'm teaching 17th century American religion, I've become a Puritan. But these are concerns that we must take seriously, whether it's issues of gender, race, ethnicity, subject matter. What are the things that preclude us from teaching what we're passionate about? Speak among yourself. Let's go fishing.